You know, in today's age of political and social disruption, as well as short tempers and harsh words, Emmanuel Cleaver stands for civil discourse and mutual respect. And if you go on the Congressman's website, there is a civility message tab that features gentle and uplifting stories urging his fellow members of Congress to end the tribal tug-of-war that's so prevalent in Washington today. And my favorite story on there is about two little girls, an African-American and a Caucasian. They're both in kindergarten at the same school. They are best friends. Their friendship and genuine love for each other runs so deeply that they actually believe they are twins. And when some would say, well, you can't possibly be twins because you don't have the same mother, one of them responded, but we are, because we have the same soul. And Congressman Cleaver observed in telling their story, if children can believe that they are the same within their hearts, regardless of how different they look or where they come from, why is it so hard for adults? Beyond serving as the conscience of Congress, Emmanuel Cleaver has worked tirelessly to advance legislation and projects that have benefited Americans from Kansas City across the United States. 2 years ago, he co-authored the bipartisan Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act, which was enacted by a unanimous vote. It reformed federal housing programs to cut costs, encourage work, reduce homelessness, and improve the quality of life for public housing residents. And locally, he spearheaded, as mayor and as member of Congress, such developments as the 18th and Vine District, and he secured funding for the Green Impact Zone, a model for improving energy, technology, and environmental responsibility in the urban core of Kansas City in partnership with companies like KCPL. Given his determined efforts to promote civil engagement, education, and equal opportunity for all, the Foundation is proud to present the 2018 Truman Good Neighbor Award to Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver.
Thank you, Carl, and let me just, and I'm going to be fast because you're anxious to go back to work. I can feel it from the crowd. But let me, first, I want to thank Kevin Pastelli for hosting the board and my wife and me last evening here at this hotel, and I would also like to recognize Dr. Harry Jonas was the one person. We had two people who were World War II vets, and he is over. Oh, yes, I wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to see him, a longtime friend, and the international students. I've met with them and discouraged them from starting to date, and yeah, I have one convert. And congratulations to all of you and the scholarship recipients. I'm not going to introduce my whole family. I have a lot of them here. You're thankful. But I will just introduce my sister who came in from Houston, Lars McNeil, my niece, Tyra Barge, and my in-laws, Grace and Ivan James, and my son, Evan, and none of them stood. Thank you very kindly, family. I appreciate you very much. Diane and I are both very, very thankful for this great honor. And let me say before I go any further, Harry Truman, when he issued Executive Order 9981, changed the United States forever. As a result of that executive order, Leroy Cleaver, my father's oldest brother, my uncle, became a Tuskegee pilot. His flight suit hangs in my closet in our home today. As a result of Harry Truman, we have seen men and women serve this country with courage and determination. It was an amazing act, and all of the discouragement he received, and all of those who cautioned him and counseled him not to do it, would not deter what he did and the rightness of that act. Harry Truman was an amazing man. It was quite quiet, but overwhelming when I received the phone call informing me that the Harry S. Truman Good Neighbor Award Foundation Board had indeed selected me as the 2018 recipient of this prestigious award, and I am humbled, honored, and at the same time discombobulated as I review the names of previous recipients. I must admit, if only to myself, that my contributions and my community work pale in comparison to the more storied honorees. I have come to expect nothing and treasure everything. This is a treasure. And even though receiving this exceedingly prestigious award is hands down the high watermark of my political career, I do need to confess that the largest open space in my soul is the room for improvement. That means that I am under self-initiated pressure. But in this case, pressure is good. Reaching back to my college literature class under Mr. Horace Bond, I shall borrow the words from Act 3, Scene 3, from Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. Shakespeare has Sebastian saying to Antonio, and I quote, "I can no other answer make but thanks and ever thanks," unquote. Psalms 104, enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him, bless his name. So excuse me, but I must also say thank you, Lord. For those who only casually observe the goings-on in Washington, you know that if our country ever needed Harry Truman, it is now. The man from Independence once said, you know, being an American is more than a matter of where your parents came from. It is a belief that all men are created free and equal, and that everyone deserves an even break, unquote. That is a far cry from Washington's cabal of nativists who are peddling fear even as they seek a judicial baptism of an un-American anti-Muslim executive order. I believe that it would be instructive for current leaders of Washington to read President Truman's 1949 inaugural speech, during which he said, and I quote, "We are moving on with other nations to build an even stronger structure of international order and justice. We shall have as our partner countries a new day. These countries are no longer solely concerned with the problems of national survival. We are now working to improve the standard of living for all their people." I think it's safe to say that Truman was not a practitioner of inflammatory and narrow nationalism. Truman, as do I, believe in a nationalism grounded in our faith that diversity, or the kaleidoscope effect, which is a unique American treasure, and it is not a capitulation or some kind of liability, but it is in fact one of our strongest assets. Disturbingly, too many Americans are falling prey to the politically pushed myth about immigrants taking their jobs from Americans, that thousands of Mexicans are crossing the borders each day with all kinds of diseases. And of course, the most blatantly counterfactual story is the one that says terrorists are crossing our southern border at all times. America is one of the most difficult countries on the planet when it comes to moving through the immigration system. And so, as Truman believed, and as I believe, our country should be a welcoming country. We cannot have exclusionary and nationalistic notions because they set the stage for self-sabotage. We are unnecessarily sending a message around the globe that we are no longer Trumanesque, which means that we are at risk of convincing the international community that the values of receptivity, inclusion, tolerance, diversity, respect for the rule of law, and freedom of the press are imposing ideas of a bygone era. Look, something has gone dangerously awry inside the greatest democracy the world has ever known. Some are attempting to convert the most welcoming nation on earth to the most exclusionary. Arguably, intolerance is the mother of nationalism, and Frankenstein a distant relative. If we turn inward, the monster will turn on us. This is to say that a narcissistic nation will retreat from the global community, which then will create a void of unmet world challenges. And that, my friends, threatens the peace of the world. Equally important is the fact that our adversaries, as they have already begun to do, are trying to fill the void. Remember that Plato admonition, one of the laws of physics: nature abhors a vacuum. And if you go to the Middle East or into Africa, you will see the presence of Russian dollars being spent, or rubles, being spent to build city halls and other federal buildings for those countries. And they are taking root around the world. On June 29, 1947, Truman became the first United States president to address the NAACP. In that historic speech, Truman spoke eloquently about the need for the United States to promote democracy by exemplification. He said, "Our case for democracy should rest on practical evidence that we have been able to put our own house in order," unquote. The United States must always glow brightly as the incontestable light of democracy for the whole world. If we lead by example, we will illuminate and stimulate the entire world, but we must practice what we preach. I believe that President Truman would agree that democracy grows by what it feeds upon. In recent days, our leaders have sought to express American exceptionalism with braggadocious yelling about our military muscle, or whether our nuclear button is larger than the nuclear button of an adversary. The United States of America does not need to demonstrate its greatness by mocking the weakness of another nation. The greatness of our nation cannot be measured by high-octane commerce or the size and prettiness of our intercontinental ballistic missiles or our towering buildings which scrape the sky. The security, safety, and soundness of this great republic rest in honestly and prudently employing all our resources and military might for the uplifting of people foreign and domestic. This is how Truman saw it. For many Americans, this is a socio-political dark time. This view is understandable given the unprecedented assault on the rule of law, the high level of homeland hostility, and the unimaginable disembowelment of the press, which during some of the most dingy days of the 20th century, German newspapers were mockingly labeled Lügenpresse, or lying press. Sounds something like fake news, as some derisively label the news today. It is also worth noting that a recent NBC Wall Street Journal poll reported that 48% of Americans said a family member shared a false story that they believed to be true. Just 33% of Americans have confidence in the CIA, and only 32% of the people of this country have trust in the FBI. Nevertheless, I believe that in any battle between light and darkness, light triumphs. I believe that a robust phalanx of Americans can cry out even in the darkness and show others the way. I believe that nothing can stay the power of awareness over ignorance, political fusion over political tribalism, racial respect over racial enmity, political activism over personal escapism, the politics of decency over the politics of disparagement. I believe that we can craft a benevolent balance between the government support of the poor and the military. I believe the solutions for our most prickly problems are within our grasp. I believe that out of our disappearing darkness, this nation will still rise and lead the world. There has never been a nation, and perhaps there never will be a nation, that can match what we've done here in the United States of America. And the worst thing we can do is to begin to surrender. The worst thing we can do is to say, woe is me, we're downhill. Let me end by telling you about an incident that happened September 4th, 1987. A small commercial plane took off from Portland, Maine. The pilot, a 42-year-old man by the name of Henry Dempsey, was flying this Eastern Express airline. They were on their way to Boston. After they had become airborne, Dempsey and the co-pilot, Paul Butcher, heard a noise. Dempsey turned the wheel over to the co-pilot and crawled back to the rear of the airplane, only to frighteningly discover that the back door is open. And so he braced himself and stuck his hand out to pull the door in, but he was sucked out. The co-pilot, realizing that something was wrong, radioed the tower back in Portland and said, "We're returning. We think that we've lost Dempsey." When the plane landed and all of the emergency vehicles surrounded the plane, they noticed something amazing. There was a man holding on to the door with both hands. The New York Times reported that his hands had to be pried loose. So what does that have to do with us? We need to hang on in there. Thank you.